Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a special Uneeda horror podcast. Elephant in the room.
Wow,
Nick's not
really?
here.
You start with fat jokes?
You're quick. I like that. I've got a special guest with me today. Snake Sauce is kind of becoming an honorary member. I think this is your third episode.
Sounds
Nick's
right.
busy. He's got his Spider-Man stuff going on. He's doing his thing. I was gonna hold off, and I was like, you know what? I know that Sauce and me, you know, we don't always see eye to eye, but one thing we see eye to eye on is Return of the Living Dead. And so I thought, let's get them back. Let's do Return of the Living Dead 2 and 3, super duper video today. So we're going to talk about, I've got the book. We're going to talk about behind the scenes stuff, memories of these two awesome sequels. We're going to get all up in it. There's no rules today. But first of all, Sauce, thank you for stepping in last
Hey,
minute to
man.
help me with this. How are you doing,
Thanks.
dude?
Not too bad. Doing all right. This whole holiday season.
Yeah.
Just messing around. Thanks for having me, by the way.
It's pleasure's all mine. And your shirt, this was so funny because the first episode I did with Piz, I told him, "Hey, can you do this podcast with me?" He's like, "Sure." What is it? I said, "Yeah, you don't even need to. You don't need to know. You don't need to prep for it." He wore a Roy Burns shirt, and I did not tell you what we were doing. I think when I messaged you earlier, I was like, "Hey, can I borrow you tonight?" You're
Hmm.
like, "Yeah," and I was like, "I don't need to tell you what's going on." And you wore the shirt. I mean,
Yeah, it's fantastic.
yeah.
Though to be fair, I think Piz and I both pretty much wear this shirt and a Roy Burns one,
Yeah,
respectively. Yeah,
Y-
nonstop. So.
y'all both have a section in the closet just dedicated to the. I think Piz probably has a 15, 20 part 5 shirts,
Oh
man.
yeah, he's all in on that movie.
But anyway, if you haven't seen any of the other episodes before, this is Steak Sauce, who runs the podcast, the Off the Grill podcast. Right from the top, Sauce, where can people find what you've got going on?
Off the Grill podcast on YouTube. Podcast every Monday, 7:30 p.m. in the East. And the various other videos as it goes. I have a Scream live commentary this Monday coming up.
Right, there you go.
And I want to hit the Patreon,
Oh,
patreon.com/off the grill podcast.
there it is. I'll have links for all that down below. So what we're going to do, guys, if you did not see part 1, which is basically the Return of the Living Dead super discussion, groundbreaking episode. I mean, that was just buck wild. One of my favorite episodes that we've done, quite possibly my favorite. Please pause this now, and you have to go watch that. There were some things that were left out of that because, I mean, we can only discuss the movie for so long before we just have to go. I mean, eventually one of us is going to have to go to the bathroom or something. I think we went hard, nearly 2 hours. I have no idea how long this one's going to go. We skipped over some stuff that I know people were wanting us to talk about, the Brian Peck situation, which we'll get into that here today. But what we're going to do today is we're going to be discussing Return of the Living Dead Part 2 and 3 because there's dedicated fan bases. I don't know, man. Sauce, I feel like I see more people that love 3 than 2. Do you see the same
Yeah,
thing?
definitely see that more often. And don't know. Not to put the cart before the horse. I don't really know if I agree with that, but that does definitely seem to be the popular sentiment.
Yeah. Well, let's cap things off from the last time. So, Return of the Living Dead comes out in 1985, and it's a hit. And a few years later, in 1988, we would get Return of the Living Dead Part 2. I'm going to give you guys, so I'm going to be referencing this book today, The Complete History of the Return of the Living Dead, which is quite possibly one of my favorite books ever. So detailed. And what I love about the print form of these kinds of documentary style books, if you will, is the honesty in them is insane. I mean, Sauce can attest. I mean, I love More Brains. It's a great documentary, and then they also have a documentary for part 2 and 3. There's They Won't Stay Dead and Love from Beyond the Grave, I believe, is what the third part is called. And they're great, but when there's a camera, there's no telling. You don't see who's off to the side. You don't see if there's other actors hanging out watching the interviews with the said person being talked that's talking to the camera. But I just feel like there's a little bit of acting going on sometimes with some of these people, and they're not being totally honest. These books are totally honest. The Crystal Lake Memories is the same way. It's brutal. They all hated each other. It was miserable experiences for so much of these people. And Return of the Living Dead is probably one of the most volatile film sets ever. But when you watch More Brains, some of the people are just happy-go-lucky. Except, I mean, William Stout is the only honest guy I think I've ever seen in one of those.
Well, William Stout and John Philbin.
Yes.
John Philbin he's like, what fucking set were these guys on? Like it was miserable. Everyone was mad at each. Like you said, everyone was pissed off at each other. You know, it's more or less an indie shoot, small budget.
Right.
You know, and Dan O'Bannon's wasn't the easiest guy to work with.
No,
You
he
know,
was not. And
the
again,
genius as he was.
yeah. And again, guys, if you never saw part one, we talked all about Beverly Randolph going to Dan O'Bannon's house and walking in on pornography on his TV with guns, an array of guns on the table, which I could understand her getting a little upset.
Yeah,
She booked it apparently. I don't know how the follow up meeting went with that. I would love to know more about that. If she said something to him or not. Probably not, knowing how just kind and angelic she seems. She probably seemed scared to bring it up. I would imagine the only reason she brought it up in the documentary was because Dan was already dead. Otherwise, she probably would have felt awkward to bring that up. But you know. All right, let's set the stage, Sauce. Here's an excerpt from the first page of Return of the Living Dead Part 2 in here. I'm just going to read one paragraph that kind of leads things off. Ken Wiederhorn would ultimately be responsible for both writing and directing Return of the Living Dead Part 2. It first entered the movie industry during the early 1970s as an assistant editor. He was based in New York. He worked for CBS's Arthur Barron on a variety of documentaries before taking over as editor on a docudrama about the Wright brothers for NET Playhouse in 71. From there, he would collaborate with such filmmakers as Arthur Penn before landing a 6-week gig on the James Bond flick Live and Let Die. It was during that time, observing how director Guy Hamilton's methods differed from the New York filmmakers he'd known before, that he would reevaluate his own concept on how motion pictures should be shot and edited. So Ken Wiederhorn, one thing I initially found about watching They Won't Stay Dead is, despite the fact that Ken seemed to not really be into doing part two, or not necessarily doing into part two. And I'm going to talk about something I learned again from reading here. It seemed like he's got a pretty good reputation, or just from the people that he worked with, in terms of like as just being a good human being and being a talented guy. Have you seen any other films he's done? Shockwaves is a pretty damn good little movie he's done.
I can't think off the top of my head if I've seen anything else he's done. But yeah, everything I know about him, fine guy. Just
Yeah, and
he doesn't seem like the kind of guy that can BS his way if his heart's not into a project, though.
right.
Yeah.
And we're going to talk more about Ken, but we're also going to get personal with this. Now, Sauce, remind the people. I think you said that Return of the Living Dead Part 2 was the first one you saw.
Yes, definitely. And there's like a pretty big gap between me seeing Part 2 and then finally seeing the original. To the point where, like, just because of the tone, it's pretty over the top comedy wise. So I just, even from a young age, this is it's a joke movie. It's just it's like a Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein kind of spoof of zombie movies. Return of the Living Dead Part 2, if as a standalone title, sounds like a parody. Get it? Sequels, But so, and then eventually I saw 3 even. So I saw both of these sequels before the original, from probably 8 or 9 years old.
And so did you have an affinity for part 2? Seeing it, was it a film that you would love to revisit,
I
or?
was anytime it was on Sci-Fi, I think it's usually the go-to channel. I was like, oh, cool, all right, I know what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
And it was always back to back 2 and 3. So
Wow. It's interesting that so part 1 was the one you saw latter from 2 and
yeah.
3. So wow. What did you
Probably,
think?
I want to say I was 15 or 16 when I saw it return for the first time. So there's a good 7-8 year gap. As weird as that sounds.
So I'm wondering, like, what were you expecting to going into Return of the Living Dead after watching 2? Hell is this going to be? Because 2 and
I
3 are so
figured it.
different.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of figured, just because that's like 2 comes after 1, as this counting goes. Um, that maybe it's a little more tonally in line with 2, just maybe a little better made.
Right.
Was probably the only real expectation I had. A little better effects, because I'm not big on 2's effects for the most part.
Which we will
Yeah,
get into.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's a lot of meat on that bone, I think.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember for me. I think I told this last time. So Cinemassacre.com, James, he had reviewed Return of the Living Dead. This was right after I found Angry Video Game Nerd. And I
Mm-hmm.
was going on his website, and I would see him do some reviews. And I remember watching Return of the Living Dead. And like we talked about before, I love the title now. I love it to death. But when upon hearing it, it just seemed so. It seemed like such a. I almost want to say like a lazy title, or just like a non-important title. Just Return of the Living Dead. That could go many ways. The film, it could have been. I mean, I thought it was going to be a direct sequel to Night of the Living Dead initially, until when I
Right.
heard the title. But the trailer, pretty much, or not the trailer, the review James did made me so enticed to see it. But
Yeah, and actually talking now, it's weird how your brain works. There's memories. I remember like seeing this and not connecting it with the other 2 movies, but seeing like this the VHS box cover, in the rental store, and just Return of the who cares? That sounds dumb, because it
yeah,
does. It's title alone, and as a young kid, you know, let's face it, we weren't too old by the time the VHS store or like the rental stores were kind of passe. But I don't know. I didn't know what punk rock was, or if I did, it was some like weird cartoony version,
right.
like what is it? The Beats, the band from Doug.
Oh man, oh now that brings back some memories. I'll tell you that right now. Holy crap! Oh man,
um, so yeah, but you're right. I mean, the title is okay. It sounds like it was made for $10.
right.
You know.
Yeah. So, matter of fact, let's see if I can get it. If I get my poster to show up, there it is. Now you can see it behind me.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I remember after watching part one, I never saw a review for part two or nothing like that. It was just an innocent. I used to go to FYE when I got into physical media around the same time, and I remember I wanted to own Return of the Living Dead. I think you brought this up last time too, and I don't think some people know this because I have people that watch the channel that are, I forget. I mean, they're born in like the year 2000, and they're 20 years old now. I mean, what the hell is going
Yeah.
on? But Netflix, I remember I used to get you'd have to rent. They mail you
Oh yeah.
DVDs,
Oh yeah.
which was a disaster because every time I would rent one, dude, they'd be scratched to hell. Some of them wouldn't even play when I would get them.
Yeah.
Luckily, return wasn't a case, but I remember I did the Netflix rent a DVD, and it was a DVD. It never had the. I remember it never had the artwork of the movie on the front. It was literally just a blank DVD, but
Hmm.
it had side A on one side and side B on the other side. I don't
Yeah.
remember if I watched both, but I was like, I don't know if that was a burn disc or what.
So that was as far as I know, and a little. I'm speaking, out of my ass a little bit, but that was like the bare bones MGM release. Just that was like first wave of that movie coming out. Side A, side B, it was widescreen, full screen. I think the only feature was like a trailer, maybe, and one of those like those. Here's like it's a slideshow of facts about the movie that don't matter.
Oh,
It's
okay.
more or less just it was filmed here and released here on this day. Oh, thanks.
Yeah.
So and I actually rented probably obviously not the same copy, but that's the first time I watched it on DVD was from Netflix. Um, had plans to do the old it never showed up, guys. I don't know what to tell you, but just
Oh man.
I obviously just ended up sending it back. Luckily, not too far after there was that green variant of the DVD. If you like, it's like green and black. It's got weird alternate looking zombies on it
Right.
that might as well be fake, but kind of comparatively packed with features. They had that nice little like the horror in the '80s kind of featurette on it. Uh,
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Which I have all those.
yeah,
But anyway, getting back to it, So I remember I was like, well, let me go buy Return of the Living Dead at FY. I want to own the film now. And I remember I went to, and I think that right around that same time that DVD had come out. I might have bought the MGM DVD with the classic
Mhm.
artwork on it, which I'm sure I've still got somewhere in the bowels of this room. But um, so when I went there, I was going to find Return of the Living Dead, and sure enough, there was Return of the Living Dead Part Two. And to my surprise, I
Mhm.
was like, "Oh, there's a sequel. Cool. Let me go ahead and grab this too." And the artwork right away, the poster or the cover of the DVD, I thought it was just beautiful. That
Yeah.
that tornadoes, I call it the tornado zombie, if you
Yeah.
will. You know,
I think that's pretty apt. I'm going to throw something out, and I wonder if you agree with it or not. I
sure.
will say, artwork alone, two is better than the original.
Yeah, that's something I would initially like right off gut answer. I would totally agree with that. I feel ashamed to say that though,
Yeah,
in a sense.
yeah.
It feels very
This
wrong.
is, I mean, this is fantastic. Don't, not shitting on this one. I'm just saying that
It's a
part two
work
is
of
pretty
art.
iconic. Yeah.
It's a beautiful work of art. Yeah, absolutely. So I remember I grabbed it, and of course I remember going home and me and my brother watched Return of the Living Dead, and he loved it too. And I was like, well, let me watch part two. And it was interesting. I don't remember my initial thought about the movie. It was certainly a film that would grow on me like a weed, and I would really start to love the music for it, and going on just going on YouTube and saying, let me try to find that song I'm hearing, because I'm hearing this flesh to flesh and bite to bite. I'm like, damn, that song hits hard. So the film would grow on me tremendously over the years, and I think I've talked about this before. That one of the things that Return of the Living Dead Part Two has done for me, above any other Return of the Living Dead or probably any other movie that I can genuinely think of, is it gave me one of my all time favorite artists ever. Was finding Julian Cope from Return of the Living Dead Part Two. When I heard that song kick in the beginning, with the pot smoking army lift driver,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I was like, well, this song is just slamming. What is this? I never heard anything like that before. And I was like, let me find out what that is. I looked it up, Space Opera. And it's one of my favorite. He's one of my favorite artists. That album, that matter of fact, the album's called Saint Julian. And that song was on the album. And so I bought the album, and it's become top five of my favorite records of all time.
Wow.
So that's a gift that I could, that film will always be my good graces. It has its, detractors. There's a lot of people that don't hate it, but there's things I really like about it, and we're going to discuss part two. One thing I want to get right here in the book was casting and the birth of part two, because um, what's kind of told in the documentary on Return of the Living Dead, on the They Won't Stay Dead documentary, which Ken Wiederhorn wasn't a part of, was that Ken just wrote the script for the movie, which really wasn't the case. And I don't know if this page kind of answers the question, but Ken does talk about casting and getting people in here. Let's see. I think I got it right here. Let's see. Well, here's a little bit of tidbit facts about it. Much like the crew, very few actors from the first film would be involved to reprise their roles for the sequel. Although Louisville had become obliterated at the end of Return of the Living Dead, there was talk that many of the actors would have a role in the sequel if one were ever produced, which I think Beverly said she got a call after part one came out from, I don't know if it was the producers or her agent, but she was led to have the impression that they were going to do a sequel with everybody again,
Yeah.
you know, which who knows how that would have worked out, but
Quickly,
go ahead.
I think that's a big missed opportunity. Um, uh, I wasn't alive then, so whatever. I don't have like, oh, I've been saying this since the beginning, but that's a. I don't think that happens often enough in movies in general, where you just cast a sequel. It's all the same actors doing different parts. Mike Flanagan did it a little bit with the Haunting of Hill House and Bly Manor. He uses a lot of the same actors though, just kind of in all of his productions. But it'd just be cool to see that whole cast just doing something different. Maybe not even you know switch it up totally. Just like whatever. I mean, could you not see Jewel Shepard or Beverly Randolph being a little older than high school, but still sister to the kid if you still went that route, or maybe you would have got a whole different movie if someone else had written it.
Yeah, yeah. Or if Dan would have come back, but Dan seemed like the kind of guy. He kind of reminds. He kind of seems like Carpenter in the sense like he gets it all out in one movie and doesn't like just do much sequels about anything. So that's probably why he didn't do another one. But right here, let's see. Let me pick back up. Okay. Uh, let's see. But once the second film rolled in production, few cast members were ever considered for the roles, although the double act of James Karen and Tom Matthews would once again become the focal point of the story, at the request of Tom Fox. In the script, veteran gravedigger Ed and his new apprentice Joey appear outside the cemetery, accompanied by Joey's girlfriend, Brenda. Once again, Ed is showing his new partners the trick of the trade, how to steal jewelry from corpses to make a quick buck. Joey is the quiet type and desperate for work, although Brenda clearly despises his new boss. Despite the success of Return of the Living Dead, Matthews was still a struggling actor, though before long he would land the starring role in Jason Lives, the sixth installment in the long-running Friday the 13th franchise released by Paramount in '86. The movie would eventually earn almost $20 million in the box office. While it's performed less than its predecessors, the film had renewed fan interest after the negative backlash against the previous movie, allowing Matthews himself a more action-oriented, heroic role. Karen, meanwhile, had remained busy on a variety of other projects. Soon after filming wrapped on Return of the Living Dead, he had commenced work on the thriller Jagged Edge, starring alongside Jeff Bridges and Glenn Close. This would be followed by the appearances in the Dan O'Bannon scripted remake of The Invaders from Mars and Oliver Stone's critically acclaimed drama Wall Street, which would also feature an Academy Award-winning turn by Michael Douglas. I need to dip into James Cameron's filmography more.
I was just thinking that I do like Wall Street a bunch. You know,
He's a guy that.
obviously it's much different. You know,
Oh yeah,
than
oh
probably
yeah,
most of the other things Karen's been in. But
oh without question. I do know that James Cameron passed away roughly. Was it 2018,
well, it
2018 or
sounds about right,
19?
somewhere around there. Yeah, because I
It
think
hurt.
Calfa was the year before that.
Yeah, Calvo was painful, and James Cameron hurt. I just can't believe Clue is still with us. I mean, that is remarkable. I think
Hey
he's in
man,
his 90s.
yeah, that SOB ain't going out easy.
I hope not. I
he
pray
might
not.
he might take death with him.
Yeah.
You son of a bitch.
Here's a few things that Ken Wiederhorn said about Jim's Karen. Ken Wiederhorn states that Jimmy Karen was a consummate professional, always there, helpful with the joke or two. When Matthews discovered I wanted Suzanne Snyder, this is something I found interesting that I didn't know about. When Tom Matthews discovered I wanted to have Suzanne Snyder play Brenda to be driving his truck in the scene where he and Jimmy were dropped off at the cemetery, he at first refused to do the scene, insisting his character would never let his girlfriend behind the wheel of his beloved truck. As the crew stood by, it took me a good 10 minutes to convince Tom otherwise. What do you think about that? That seems a little interesting. I mean, is it the sign of the times back then,
I
or
mean, that's definitely a sign of the times, but it's a cat that knows or thinks he knows his character. I mean,
that's what I would chalk it up
what
to?
whether they're method or not, like they still a lot of times will put backstory into a character. Even if it's just in their head, because it'll help them get to where they need to be to do what they've got to do. So yeah, I don't think it's some girls can't drive, some like ogre shit like that. But
Yeah. Very interesting. I
it,
didn't
it
know
is
that.
it is interesting. I've read this book, but I mean, it was probably 10 years ago at this point.
There's so much. Yeah, there's
Yeah,
so much. There's so much knowledge here. It's impossible to retain it
and
on one read.
yeah, and I'll say too, for anyone that I don't, I mean, it's long out of print, but anyone, if you can get your hands on it, it goes much deeper in depth on the sequels than the more brains
Oh yeah. Here's just
featurettes do.
like I said, guys. I was telling Sauce, I was like, I kind of bookmarked some important things or things that I thought would be great for conversation, and I mean, this book is just chock full of information, and I even have stuff about the latter sequels in the back, Necropolis and
Those don't exist. That's
Grave
all
to Grave.
fake. That's
Yeah,
fake.
we're not doing an episode on those. So Sauce, I'm gonna bring up a few more things. Obviously, as people would see, that this film does not only has the two main stars from the previous film, which were James Karen and um, Tom Matthews. And I, for one, would have loved to have seen Don Calfa be in the film. And now in the documentary, more brains, which people need to see. I'll be honest with you guys. Somebody's uploaded more brains to YouTube, so you
Yeah.
can watch it there.
More
I would have,
and yeah, and the
yeah,
featurettes for 2 and 3.
and the featurettes for
Um,
2 and 3.
those are different channels. The same guy didn't do all put all 3 things up,
Yeah.
but they're all easily available.
When I need something to get me through the day at work, I always put that on, and I just listen
Yep.
to it, and it's so comfortable.
Yeah.
So in the documentary, Don Calfa. He talks about he auditioned and didn't get the part, and he kind of left it at that. Excuse me. But in here, I finally found what he kind of went through. He goes, "This is from Don Calfa." He goes, "Well, I'd rather not go over this, but I'll tell you, I was up for the role of a doctor, a drunken doctor. I read and I didn't get it. It went to Philip Bruns, who can be very good and very effective. He was an
Hmm.
off Broadway comic. I can't for the life of me remember if I saw the movie, and to be honest, I couldn't give a fair opinion on it. I know I had written a sequel for our movie with Roger Carney called Revenge of the Living Dead, and I gave it to Tom Fox, and that was the end of that. I also gave it to Dan O'Bannon, who, by the way, loved it. I didn't know that. I had no idea that Calfa wrote a treatment and sent it to Dan.
I'd love to. I mean, I'm sure it's lost the time. I'm sure, but I would love to be able to look at that.
Oh, me too.
You know,
Maybe it's online. I don't know. I've never seen anything or heard anything about this.
yeah,
Before reading this.
yeah. It's again. I mean, that's something that I didn't like retain from reading it the first time. But I always saw, I mean, after I saw the original, I saw Kalfa as that doctor. Who, by the way, that actor did fine. With the tone of that movie, I
Very
think,
slapstick. Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
he works a little better. He's also, pretty sure anyway. Um, just a little piece of trivia. He's George Costanza's original father. The first time Frank Costanza appears.
Right.
Now in reruns now, and I'm not sure on Netflix what the deal is. In reruns, they did reshoot the first episode he's in with Jerry Stiller, but
Uh-huh.
they yeah. So originally it was, I'm pretty sure it was that cat.
So Don Calver right here adds a little bit more. So he said he gave his treatment to Dan, and he goes, he loved it, which amazes me because he doesn't like anything. Anyway, yeah. He goes, anyway, a gag wound would end up in the film of a severed zombie hand, and I thought, well, what you going to do? I would say I was treated terribly. Me, Jimmy, and Clue, those two are pieces of Americana and are remarkable lead actors, and the three of us were the cornerstone of Return. But what are you going to do? I read for Wiederhorn again, and he never even acknowledged that he met me before. Now that Jimmy mentioned that, he and Tom Matthews rang me from the set one night, and it was nighttime, I believe, and they were saying, "Hey, Don, thank God you didn't do this movie. We're on our own and we're shooting at night." I said, "How's
Hmm.
Phil Bruns doing?" And they said, "He's just too over the top, but sometimes that can work," which I think we kind of alluded to, that we both would agree that I think he got the role because, quite frankly, he was probably more in line with what Ken Wiederhorn was looking for.
Mhm.
You have to give Ken Wiederhorn the benefit of the doubt that he knew exactly what tone he was going for with this movie to begin with, which is
Yeah,
probably why Don didn't get it. I still would have loved to have seen Don in the movie, but I do like the actor that we got.
yeah, and I guess it's a case where Wiederhorn, I don't think from what he's talked about. I think he did a commentary on the original DVD release, but I don't know how much he'd spoken about it outside of that, and maybe the book. Um, but this isn't a case of like studio interference where the director is like, this is not the movie I want. This is exactly what he wanted to do because he wanted to not have to do horror movies anymore. So he wanted, look, I could do comedy, guys. Hire me for something else. Get me out of here, please. And I think he will on that DVD commentary. I think he does pretty much kind of say, yeah, really had no interest in horror. Are you kidding me?
He doesn't, which is
Yeah,
interesting. And some of his probably most notable films are horror movies. Eyes of a Stranger, which is a slasher film, Shockwaves, which Shockwaves is a pretty damn good movie. And obviously Return of the Living Dead 2. So that's the irony is that some of these guys, I mean, Carpenter was the same way. He wanted to make westerns for God's
yeah.
sakes. But let's get a little bit more personal really quick. So, Return of the Living Dead Part 2, like, what are some of the things that really stand out to you, whether it be nostalgia or things now when you watch the film that you genuinely just enjoy? What gets you through the film, so to speak?
So I mean, Matthews and Karen are as over the top as they were. It's still played in the first one.
Right.
They're probably, I think they amp it up probably twofold in this one, and it still works. They know, and there's a just like an inborn kind of like, oh, I know what I'm doing. I know what this is,
Right.
and they know how to amp it up or pull it back. Just instinctively. That's the word I was looking for 3 fucking minutes. And so like that's fun to watch now. As a kid, I'm actually the lead bully kid, the one that eats his mom's brains.
I could find
Spoilers.
his name.
Um, uh, Tor Van something or other. I guess the only movie he ever did.
Thor Van Lingen or Lingen,
Yeah,
however
that's
you
it.
pronounce it.
Um, he scared the shit out of me as a kid. Actually, like once he turns, like that is pretty effective for a kid that wasn't an actor. He was just kind of cast. They held just open auditions, and he got the part.
Right.
Um, you know, I think even still, like he's still pretty threatening. Uh, to the hell's the other kid's name? The lead kid,
This
the nice little
yeah.
nice guy. What's his face? Blondie.
It's funny because I was looking for some interviews from him in here. Um, Jonathan Terry is the Colonel.
Mhm.
Kenny Myers. Marsha Dietland. I wish Marsha would have been in the documentary, like for video, because I love her. Jesse's older sister. I thought she
Okay.
was so
Yeah.
cute and adorable. I love her in the movie, but I mean, I wish she would have been in there. I'm trying to see what the kid's name is. Did they? Maybe the kid wasn't around for the book to do it, but I can't find him. Any interviews from him in here? Dana Ashbrook's all in here.
Yeah.
Uh, can't
Yeah.
find him. Can't find the kid.
Yeah. Torva and Lingen was also on the. It was one of those old commentaries where it's like they piece together 2 interviews more or less. Like that, or I think they both watched the movie separately, and they would kind of switch from one track to the next.
Right.
He had fun, and he's like, it was just cool. My basketball team thought I was the coolest guy, which that's got to be pretty sweet. I know the Jacob from Nightmare 5 had like quite the opposite experience, but
Oh yeah. So I was seeing something. Well, first, when I watch Return of the Living Dead 2, I don't know what it is. It's one of those comfort movies for me. Return of the Living Dead 2 is one of those movies I can throw on at any time and
mm,
just I love and I do I don't know. I'm not really a big fan of kid actors. I mean, I don't go out of my way to watch movies with them, but I always liked Jesse in this one. And the villain, he like James Cameron said, he had a skull head and he was just like a creepy bully. He had a
yeah.
creepy look. Them hanging out at the mausoleum was probably something I would have done at that age too, because before the cell phone age and all that technology. Something
Hey,
creepy
let's see how
about
much
that.
trouble we can get into.
Yeah. And I
And
just
then,
I go ahead.
no, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I love the tone of this movie. I love horror comedy. That's my number one favorite subgenre of horror, especially when it's done right. And this one, I just feel like I don't know, man. It's hard for me to find movies that have this tone that would work for me. But I got to give it to Ken. I mean, it's not a perfect movie, but there are things I really like about it, despite the handicaps that it was given. We're going to talk about Kenny Myers.
Hmm.
I think there is some cool artwork. I mean, special effects in here. There's some stuff that's incredibly done well. Like there's a paraplegic, I believe, zombie in here that we
Yeah.
got from, kind of like we had the dwarf in part one, and we had
Yeah.
a paraplegic in this one. But there were also some problems, and we're gonna get into that. But getting Kenny Myers onto the film, he would talk about working with Ken, and Ken. He talks again. He talks good about Ken Wiederhorn, but they just, he made it seem like it was almost like a drag to be there making the movie
Mhm.
because you know you got a guy. I was trying to find the actual quote in here. My sticky note might have got misplaced, but what I read in here was something I wanted to bring up. Now I remember it vividly in here, so I know that this is the truth. Ken Wiederhorn had a script written already, and it was called Grave Robbers,
Yeah.
and uh, Tom Fox liked that script and just said, "Hey, what if we just made this Return of the Living Dead 2?" And Ken was like, I mean, if it's going to get me a job,
Yeah.
sure, because he needed a job.
Hmm.
So Tom Fox had him rewrite portions of the script to make it a Return of the Living Dead film, in essence, adding the 2,4,5 trioxin barrel and things like that. So I was always under the impression that Ken Wiederhorn was just like, let me watch the first movie and then just kind of rip it off, like
Yeah.
literally just do it over again. And that just wasn't the case. And I feel like that's somewhat of a narrative that's put out there by the documentaries themselves and the interviews that people have given, which isn't necessarily true. Or it's not true really at all. I mean, I don't remember reading that, but it's interesting to note that he had already written a script that Tom Fox. I wonder what was going through Tom Fox's mind. Obviously, he was a banker. Like he really must have just been like he got lucky, right? I mean, he produced a
Well,
good film, and
that I mean, that's I think a lot of producers are just they're money guys. Like that's kind of pull it to Bob Shea. Was a producer. Um, in Wes Craven, so yeah, producer's a money guy. Shut up, let me make my movie. And Shea didn't like that. But most other producers are totally cool with just going, yeah, here's some money. I kind of was thinking this, but again, I'm just a money guy.
right.
So when you hit on something like Return, well, let's just see if let's just milk it for more money. They don't give it. They don't have. They don't necessarily have that same the way we feel about the movie. I love that movie because it made me a shitload of money. So I could take the proceeds from that and hopefully make we're half the proceeds and make more money off of it.
Yeah.
Because even if they're only making 70%, which I think is kind of the statistically what a sequel does compared to the original, um, even if only is 70%, that's still free money more or less.
Yeah. I mean, I
Um,
because it was
so,
they probably still made 4 or 5 times the budget of what it was for part
oh yeah,
two, at
yeah.
least, right? I mean, it was profitable.
Hmm.
So we're going to start talking about Kenny Myers real quick for part two. Now, here's something Kenny said about working with Ken. He says, I knew he was unhappy through casual conversations during filming, and even though I liked him as a person, I thought he felt like a fish out of water. He either didn't understand the workings of the original picture or the genre wasn't what he was directing. I don't really know, or perhaps there were other circumstances. It's hard to say. He was not a fan. He didn't know who Forrest Ackerman was when he showed up for a cameo in the film. To me, that's someone who didn't really have a background in the material. I knew he had directed a horror film about Nazis returning from the dead, but not an intended comedy zombie picture. That's Shockwaves, which is a pretty damn
Okay.
good movie. In my humble opinion, he didn't understand what many of us knew from the beginning, and that was the comedy of Return was character driven by people in unusual situations, not driven by the slapstick silliness of the zombies. But I felt my job was not to argue with the director, but to support his vision, right or wrong. I don't feel it created any undue tension. And for me, a malice of feeling. It was all just wasted time and effort. So again, Kenny was a guy that just bad memories, but on the Scream Factory Blu-ray, he has talked about how, and this book is, I think, at least a decade old, like you were saying. He has talked about now how he's like, the more time has gone away, I'm able to go back and watch the film and have better memories about it, which is interesting and happy for me to see that because I don't. If I love a movie, I don't want to hear people trash it. I just, it's like watching. I'm a big Halloween 3 fan, so when I put on the documentary, Erwin Yablans, they start out the documentary with Erwin Yablans saying this movie's stupid. I don't know why they would have done this. I'm like, well, shit, man. Why am I watching this? Like, I'm a fan. What the hell's going on here? You know.
Yeah. I went through a period, I think, after seeing the original, like, oh, 2 sucks. It's lame. It's no good. And I'm glad I kind of fought it out of that. It's very different tonally, but it's still good. It's got a lot of merit to it. For a sequel, late '80s horror sequel.
No, let's talk about the special effects work on this film. Now, it's important to note that William Stout basically said, if you try to do anything that looks like my film, we're gonna have it. We're gonna have a problem. So obviously, Kenny had
I
to do his own thing, right?
I almost think he almost word for word, I'll sue the shit out of you.
Right. Oh,
So,
and Stout seems like he seems like a guy that just like you don't want to fuck with him.
no, no.
I like him a lot because he is
Mhm.
a no BS kind of
And,
guy.
and he's a straight shooter, absolutely.
Yeah, but Kenny Myers, it's interesting. There are things about this film. I mean, there are some designs in this film that I think are just brilliant. I mean, Kenny is so talented, but unfortunately, he fumbles. And knowing the circumstances now, I don't really hold it against him so much. But like, the Tarman design, it just, I guess if I had to call it anything, it was like a great value version.
Yeah,
As it's like, it's the Sam's Choice version
yep.
to, Tarman being Coke, and this is Sam's Club Coke.
Yeah, and it looks like just like a giant action figure. Like the arms can only go up and down like this, and like it's very boxy. It's weird. It doesn't have and it's still Troutman in the costume, but it doesn't have that like he could fall apart at any moment kind of effect to it.
Yeah, I mean, and as far as the scene goes, it's weird. It's like I like it, but it does leave a lot to be desired.
Yeah,
You don't
and
get the
I
whole lot of Tarman's
no,
movements
and I
and
think that's one of those things where he said, "Hey, rewrite this script, and we'll make Return of the Living Dead 2." So they went, and we need to get Tarman in here. That's a big kind of iconic piece of imagery from the first one. So we need to have it in the second one, Ken. So he's okay. Well, here he is,
gone.
getting the creek
And,
or
and
whatever
it's
the hell.
and if memory serves, he never shows back up the entire
No,
movie.
nope. That is the only scene.
And that, when you put it into perspective that way, I mean, it literally was just like a quota.
Mm-hmm.
We got to have this, we got to
Yeah,
have that.
it's like that
Um,
Sean Cunningham formula.
yeah, but some of the designs that Kenny would do, I thought were brilliant. Especially it's very slapstick, but of course, but like one of the she looks like an old school teacher or something when she comes out of the grave and she puts her
Yeah,
glasses on. Some of
yeah.
those designs are brilliant, man.
I'll say this. I think a lot of the background zombies in this one, or the lesser, the ones that aren't the featured kind of they look better in this one than they did in the first movie. The background zombies are just kind of like, here's like a weird, like yellowish paint. They didn't really. There's not a whole lot of makeup done on the running the background zombies in the first one. There was a little more care taken as far as that goes, and I think as a sequel they decided, well, fuck it, man, let's just spend all the money on effects. We'll get whoever we can get. We'll
Right.
pay Tom and James, whatever they want, or whatever, a little more than probably the rest of the cast, even though they're not like the focal point of the story, really. They're the catalyst for everything kind of going to shit, but
So let me ask you this, Sauce. Who was your favorite character from Return of the Living Dead Part 2?
oh, I mean, I'm a big Suzanne Snyder mark.
Isn't she so cute in this
Oh
movie with her
man,
nice red
yeah,
hair and
hmm
everything? And
yeah,
she's sassy,
yeah. Um, I like the doctor. Again, as over the top as he is, it works for this movie, and it's kind of fun just to see him just kind of like, oh, just gonna keep drinking. Hey,
Oh man.
this car's cherry, pal.
Yeah.
And you know the zombie that gets on the not the intercom, but the Harry Truman. He looks like Ryan Stiles from the Drew Carey show and Who's Line,
Oh yeah.
the tall guy.
He does.
Yeah.
God, I haven't watched that show in years,
Yeah.
man. Dude, when you mentioned that the quota in this movie was so weird, like that was something that they decided to do as well. That
Hmm.
quotable line, wow. I didn't really put that together till just now, but like that was another call back to the first movie. Just interesting, when you really look at the film from that lens. But one thing I wanted to mention real quick was in here, I wasn't finding an answer on what happened with the initial DVD release. Now I'm going to tell you what the rumor was, and I'm going to tell you what my personal thought is, and I want to know your thoughts on the actual music. So I'm sure you bought the DVD of Return of the
Hmm.
Living Dead Part 2, and you would watch the movie, and you would hear this music, and then you would probably find out, well, the VHS or whatever had different music.
Yep.
The rumor was something happened with the license of the music, the original score for the movie, and so when the DVD came out, it was changed. Um, and I would try to research this. I would look stuff up about this, and I could never find anything about it. The Blu-ray comes out. They interview the composer, and all he talked about was they had somebody doing the score. They put the music to the film. Ken wasn't happy, and when he was cutting the music in, and he was like, "This guy doesn't have he's not getting the vibe. He's not
Hmm.
getting the slapstick." So he eventually got pulled off, or they pulled him off, and they redid the score again. So the Blu-ray comes out, and it's the original score on there again. Nobody has ever talked about a logistic reason of what happened with that DVD. Okay, the soundtrack, the music from, is the same.
Hmm.
So as far as a lawsuit goes, that wouldn't make any sense to me. There's still Julian Cope on the DVD. There's still Joe Lamont on the DVD. The placement of Flesh to Flesh is different. Flesh to Flesh plays in the car chase scene on the original soundtrack version, which is on the Blu-ray now. But on the DVD, Flesh to Flesh plays right at the credits,
Yeah.
which I kind of prefer there, to be honest with
Yeah.
you.
I like it in the credits.
But this is the first thing I want to get at. The scores. Which one do you prefer? I mean, honestly, taking away or putting it in any aspect you want, because me personally, I don't know which one I prefer, but I'll tell you, I am a fan of that DVD score. I do like some of the beats and hits, especially when the grave scene happens, when everybody's coming out, that da na 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 na, which is the
Yeah.
intro to the
Yep.
show, and I turn into like a bop, you know. But that score, I loved that.
Yeah. I can't pick one over the other myself. They're both fine. Neither one is like mind blowing, and I'd be shocked if there's a lot of people like I got to get my hands on the vinyl for this.
Yeah. I mean, I
Either
did, but
version.
I'm a psychopath.
Well, I mean, a little different case, I think, but um, and now I don't know if you know this, but on the DVD release, if you switch it to the French language, the French like dub or whatever, it's the original from like the VHS release. That's the music that plays.
Okay, that is so interesting. I never did that, but it is
Yeah.
so interesting that you mention that. Here's my thinking what happened, Sauce. I think that whoever, what Warner Brothers, when they put that DVD out, they just grabbed a print with the original music, the original music on it,
Yeah.
meaning the guy who got fired. I think that's what happened. It wasn't a lawsuit. It wasn't an issue with the rights. I think somebody they just grabbed a print with the original score, because I've never read anything about a lawsuit before. But that
Yeah.
that that became the thing people would talk about. I mean, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if there was ever like anyone going, "Oh, I'll sue you if this." It was just a matter of there was probably some gray area with one over the other, and let's just you know we're trying to make money on this, so let's not even risk it and just. slap something else in there. It's
Mm-hmm.
just it's DVD release. Who gives a shit? Basically, I'm assuming is their thought process, because a lot of these studios, especially horror movies, they don't care about them. They're vehicles to make money.
Yeah.
So that's unfortunately, and sometimes it's a good thing, because they're not looking at it. They're not head in the sand with it. So sometimes studio decisions are a good thing. Um, but I think that's all that was.
I almost wonder if it was a complete oversight. It wasn't even something people didn't even realize. I that's the only thing I could think of. Which makes me I would never get rid of my DVD for that reason. I
Yeah.
love, sometimes I'll watch that DVD just because I kind of like that score.
Mhm.
It's different. It still works in my opinion. I do love the originals. Excuse me. I do love the score that's meant for the movie
Mhm.
as well. But I go back and forth. Um, but a few more things I want to talk about. Here's a quote from Marcia, who was Jesse's older sister, who might be my favorite character from this movie. I just love the older sister. I think she was so pretty in that movie, and
She
she's a
wrote the sizes
badass.
nicely.
Oh man, I love that scene. This was what Marcia thought about the film after it came out. Um, I thought the film got a lot of flack for being so. I think our film got a lot of flack for being so silly, but I thought it was necessary because they had cast Tommy and Jimmy as different characters who shared the same fate. It had to be comic because of that. I think that the effects by Kenny Myers made the horror part of the film amazing, and I love that the zombies were kind of stupid rather than just scary, which I would assume if zombies were ever real, for some bizarre reason, they probably would be dumb.
Yeah, it's they're barely functioning.
You know.
I mean, these ones run at least, but I mean, more often than not, zombies are just kind of singularly focused, and they're not like, well, I won't eat the kid. That's they don't have that thought process. So I think you're right.
Yeah. The film, let's see. I still cover my eyes when they cut to the worm woman. The
Mm.
film ended up being very much, excuse me, as I envisioned it would be. I was pleased with how it turned out, and I felt that Ken got the comic horror tone just right. I do too. I really do. But here's Ken on the finishing touches of the movie. Here's a couple things. Ken said it was really weird because they tested the film to death, and the usual procedure in LA, they take the film outside of Los Angeles media market, which means you've got to get out beyond the range of the local television stations. Because what they're doing is they're testing the film and they're testing the campaign. So he tested the film up in San Joaquin Valley, Bakersfield, and went down to San Diego. And I think we went to Arizona, and it went through an extensive period of testing, which was great because I was able to figure out what worked and what didn't with an audience in terms of where the laughs fell. The audience ratings were high enough for Laura Marr to go ahead with a full up national release. Unfortunately, they never clearly decided to go horror or to go comedy in the campaign. My take on it was that you can mix horror and comedy, but you cannot let the audience know this in advance. People who like comedy don't generally like horror, and the horror crowd want their gore USDA organic. Pretty funny from Ken. But once you get them into the theater, it's another story. What basically Ken is saying is, once you get them into the theater, that's the only goal. I don't care if they like the movie because then we already got their money.
Well, you got their money, but I mean, then it's again, you've made a decision one way or another. You're getting one of those audiences. I
Yeah.
as with looking at some of my favorite movies, it's odd to say, but I'm not really big on horror comedy. Like Shaun of the Dead to me is one of the worst things I've ever seen. I mean, I love this movie. I love the original. I love Night of the Creeps. But
It's hard to get
two,
it. It's hard to get it right,
it's
man.
tough to get it right. Exactly. And so, like for me, it's like even someone that is a big comedy fan, a big horror fan. I don't. That's not appealing. You go one way or the other with it. Oh, that's a funny movie about zombies. I'm in. Or it's a shit, it's like a balls to the wall zombie movie. I'm in.
Yeah.
But you know, and just to bring up, you brought up Lorimar. I know Lorimar is like the production house for like Full House,
Uh huh.
and just come with some of those late '80s, early '90s sitcoms. And this very much seems like something that could very well be like a Lorimar TV movie. Tonally, like this this would almost fit in on like TGI Friday,
Which is yeah.
TGIF ABC programming.
which is probably why Lorimar was high on. I mean, I would assume that's why they liked the pitch for this and why they went with it. Here's something from Dana, and after this, we're going to talk about the we're gonna get the Brian Peck conversation going
Yeah.
because I know that the people want to hear this, and I felt so bad that I didn't get to it the last one. So Dana Ashbrook, who was the satellite installation technician in Return of the Living Dead Part Two, or actually, was it satellite or just cable? Maybe
I
it was
think it was just cable.
just cable.
But
I'm giving him too much. But Dana Ashbrook, who Dana was great. He talks about. Here's a little quote from Dana, just so we can get some context from him. Not sure why he goes. Not sure why this movie is considered a classic. I think it shares its place among the living deads, but it seemed to not have any edge compared to the others. It was my first movie, so I will always have a special place in my heart. I loved working on it, and I will always have great memories of those 2 months. The people, Brian Peck, uh, Tom, Jimmy, Phil, Sue, and Doug Benson. We were what made the movie so special and a hell of a lot of fun. And really quick, Marcia, which was Jesse's older sister, she says, I liked the film when I saw it. I thought it was funny and the special effects and makeup were great. I'm not really a horror film person, but I enjoyed it. I have a 15-year-old son who just watched it for the first time, and he thought it was one of the best movies he's ever seen. He also said,
wow.
Mom, you rocked in it, which made me smile. That's kick ass.
Yeah.
So let's get to it. So one of the moments in this film, which I do love the moment in the film at the very end, once we learn that electricity, oddly enough, is what kills the zombies. At the very end, we're treated to a Brian Peck performed Michael Jackson zombie, where he does his Thriller dance and gets electrocuted and dies. I do love that moment in the film.
Yeah.
What the hell? It's perfect way to end it. When I first saw the film, I was kind of like stunned because even as a 19-20-year-old kid watching the film for the first time when I did, I just knew. I was like, something tells me Michael Jackson didn't sign off on this. Like just
Yeah.
knowing what the film was and everything. But I love it. I'm assuming. I mean, what's your take on the finale? Are you okay with the electricity thing? I mean, it's a little
I,
odd to
I
me.
mean, it's it's as I guess valid as any other kind of. Well, this is how you do it. It's a good setup. That they kind of lead them to the place, and I don't necessarily think that the shit they did to kind of get the electricity flowing works in real life. But again, it's a movie. It's not so outrageous that you can't suspend disbelief.
Right.
So I like it. And the Michael Jackson thing is funny. As long as I can remember, I've been a Michael Jackson fan. So it's oh, that's cool. A little sweet. And perfectly in line with the tone of the movie. So
Well, speaking of touching kids,
oh Jesus.
um, Brian Peck. I guess we'll just get into it, and we'll try not to. After this, we're going to move on to part 3. So Brian Peck was involved. Brian Peck played multiple zombies in Return of the Living Dead Part 2 because Kenny decided to have a crew, a core group of actors to do the main zombie work that you would see close up, nice shots on screen. So Brian Peck was the leader of this crew, and he was throughout the movie and certain clips, and he played the Michael Jackson zombie. But Brian Peck has done some bad things. But what I learned about this from, interestingly enough, did you watch the YouTube video, like the Dan Schneider?
I've gone down that rabbit hole a couple of times. I've seen different videos. I don't know if I've seen any kind of like definitive, like hour long kind of expose kind
I
of thing. And unfortunately, with just with the power that Hollywood has, anything like that is just kind of compiled by people as somebody or several somebodies. That the media can easily just go, some crackpot, you're crazy. Even with legitimate evidence, it's disheartening for sure. Yeah, Dan's a disgusting person, a vile individual.
Which I
Anyway,
yeah, I guess the reason for you listening, people, the reason I bring up Dan Schneider was because Brian Peck would work for Nickelodeon for a
yeah.
number of years with Dan Schneider, and Dan Schneider, if you're around our age, produced. It's always these crazy bastards that have like the most creative minds. I mean,
Hmm.
it's just the
Yeah.
truth.
Hmm.
Dan Schneider created so many great Nickelodeon shows that we loved
And
growing up.
if you guys recall the movie Good Burger, he's the fat manager of Good Burger in the movie. I'm pretty sure. Positive that's him. Actually, I mean,
Um, so let's get
just so
to
you can get a just so you can get a look at him.
yeah.
Um, yeah, and he's repugnant. He's a foot fetishist. Like his whole Twitter, I don't know. I think it's probably been suspended at this point. There was a time where his entire Twitter was like, "Hey kids, send pictures of your feet dressed up like Santa, whatever the fuck, Santa Claus, and the winner will get a retweet," or just like real creepy shit like that. Just give me all your feet pics, kids.
Yeah, he was
You
obsessed with
know.
feet.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm trying to find an article that way I can just get the facts right. I got one. Exclusive. So basically, Dan Schneider finally got taken out off of Nickelodeon. Never got in trouble, but kid actors were coming out saying this dude's
Yeah.
disgusting. This dude's a sick
And
freak.
one of the big rumors is that Britney Spears' sister
Jamie
got
Lynn
pregnant. Jamie Lynn Spears got pregnant on the set of not on the set, but while she was filming Zoe 101.
101.
And the big rumor is that that's Schneider's kid. So, she was what, 15, 16 tops then, and just kind of went away for years. So, well, we got to.
Yeah. And basically, another thing I was in this documentary about, this is where Brian Peck starts coming. So Brian Peck was a child talent scout, talent agent, talent whatever. He worked
Talent
on the shows,
and acting teacher
and he was
coach.
so he was involved of being around all these kids, and the rumor mill was coming out about him. Brian Peck got 16 months in prison.
Yep.
He I don't remember the actress or the young female actor or male. I forget if it was male or female. I think Brian is gay, which has nothing to do with it. It doesn't matter if
Yes.
you're gay, but we're talking about underage. So I can't remember. My point is, I can't remember if it was male or female, but he went to prison for 16 months. And I don't know if Brian was able to keep this under wraps in the public well. It seems like none of the cast members of Return, including Kenny Myers, mention it or act like it's a thing. Maybe
No,
it's just they're good friends, and
yeah,
Kenny's like, I don't know. I just
and that's
wonder about that.
because that is the shocking thing. Once I discovered all this had happened with this guy, because initially, like when he talks about the movie on the first DVD, not the second DVD release, he's affable, likable guy. So Brian's cool. He's a cool guy. He loves the movie, which that's awesome. And then you read all this shit and your heart breaks. And you're like, oh God. But even past that, like within even the last 4, 5, 6 years, they all still kind of like at conventions, they're all chummy and arms on the shoulders and it's good to catch up, blah blah blah. And it's crazy to me.
It's
Because like it's not like it was a statutory thing where he's whatever, it's still creepy, but she's 16, 17 years old or something, or he they're kids, they're like 12, 13 tops. And some of the convictions is 8 counts of sexual abuse, including abuse by anesthesia or controlled substance.
Jesus.
Like that's reprehensible. It's not like an accidental or
No,
like
he's just,
there was conviction in his actions. There's
yeah.
uh,
I can give a little bit of information about this, and then we'll move on. Here was an article from 2015. The headline is exclusive: pedophile X-Men actor, which I'm assuming Brian Peck was in X-Men. I would know. Pedophile X-Men actor convicted of sexually abusing Nickelodeon child star, is still working with underage kids. That was the kicker. Okay, that
Yeah.
was the thing. Brian Peck served 16 months in prison after admitting to 2 counts of abusing a Nickelodeon child actor. He was charged with 8 counts of sexual abuse, including abuse by anesthesia or controlled substance, like you said. The actor, 54, this was in 2015, so now he's about to
60.
be 60, yeah,
Yeah.
was in 2 X-Men movies and all 3 Return of the Living Dead movies, and is now featured in controversial documentary on pedophile abuse in Hollywood. Since release from prison, he has been a dialogue coach, worked on Disney series, and played teacher, and claims to be friends of Charlie Sheen. That like I like how they add the Charlie Sheen thing in there.
Yeah.
Like,
Well, I think the even bigger deal than Charlie Sheen is that, as you mentioned, the X-Men actor Bryan Singer was the producer on that, I think. And Bryan Singer is one of like the big kind of kingpins that it's often kind of pointed to when they talk
oh
about
man,
sexual abuse of the children in Hollywood.
dude,
Um,
there's a lot of probably
it's
just
there's
dark.
so many, just like it's this ain't really the place for it, but there's the
Well, we're
web
here
is,
now,
is yeah.
so
I mean, we'll get in, but I'm just saying there's a much bigger conversation to be had. You know,
oh man, and it's Corey Feldman's one of the loudest guys, but he's such a
yeah,
wild guy. Nobody will listen to
yeah.
him, but
Hmm.
you know. But here's a little bit more. He was only banned with direct contact with children, so he's able to work on children's series on sets with underage actors. Tracked down by Daily Mail Online, he refused to comment on his 2004 conviction, but Not for Profit says he shows why laws need to be changed. Well, here's a few things added about this. This is when they found him out and about on the streets of Hollywood. He, I guess somebody finally, the people started digging into this shit and they started finding out about it. As he strolls through Hollywood, and this is in 2015, X-Men and Living Dead actor Brian Peck doesn't seem to have a care in the world. A regular at horror conventions, Peck has a lengthy and continuing Hollywood career and claims a friendship with Charlie Sheen. But in fact, Peck is a convicted child sex offender who used his movie industry role to abuse a Nickelodeon star and who astonishingly is not banned from working with children. Dubbed the Hollywood doesn't want you to see, an open secret tells the story of 5 victims who said they were molested as young boys trying to make it in the film business. Peck is featured in this film, but Daily Mail has obtained full details on the charges that were leveled against him. Perhaps most disturbingly, he is only prohibited from direct contact with children, not from being part on productions in which children are acting, meaning that since being convicted, he has worked on a Disney show and a horror movie set in a high school. He played a sex head teacher,
Yeah.
according to the movie's credits. Peck, 54, was convicted in 2004. He was convicted of a lewd act against a child and oral copulation of a person under 16. I hate to ask, but what does that mean?
That's basically a blowjob.
Oral copulation. Okay. In
And
court document.
I'm glad they spare you the details of
Yeah. In court documents obtained by Daily Mail Online, the victim is only named as John Doe to protect his identity. Well, good deal. The child did not want his identity revealed for
Oh
fear of
yeah.
having a negative effect on his career. Peck has been coaching the youngster and acting at his home where the offenses happened, and was only arrested after the budding actor's parents reported him to the police. The document shows Peck was originally charged with 11 counts, including lewd act upon a child, sodomy of a person under 16, attempted sodomy of a person under 16, sexual penetration by foreign object, 4 counts of oral copulation of a person under 16, oral copulation by anesthesia or controlled substance. What the fuck? Sending harmful matter and using a minor for sex acts. In the end, he pleaded no contest to 2 counts. Lewd act against a child and oral copulation, and the court found him guilty of both. The remaining counts were dismissed. What the? And they actually have this website, dailymail.co.uk, actually has the legal documentation on all this stuff. But basically, these people found him out and about, and they went up to him and they said, "Do you have any comment on your 2004 charge?" And he's like, "No, I don't have anything to say about it." But dude, it's just like I I don't know what to say. Look, I know that neither me or you are the type of guys that are like cancel people, bury them.
Yeah,
I'm just more so shocked that he's been able to
but
do.
this isn't saying a yucky word, or giving it, an unpopular opinion. This is like one of the worst things you can do. Like uh, again, it's fucking how could you ever, in good conscience, give this guy a job again?
Mind
Like
blowing.
at least not in the same fucking field with the same people that he
Here's
offended
my
against.
here's my
Like
guess. She want to know why he gets a job back.
he
Well, if
knows
you
where the
guys,
bodies are
hey,
buried.
yeah, I was gonna say, well, if you guys don't give me my job back and let me go back to work, I'm outing everybody.
Yeah. I mean, that's probably a lot of it, and also a lot of them don't really give a shit because they're doing the same things.
Yeah,
You know,
disgusting.
yeah,
Jesus
like to say
Christ.
the least.
So yeah, but basically, guys, Brian Peck is he's not going to be Times Person of the Year.
It's
Just,
no
dude,
Elon Musk.
what really gets me was the lewd act with anesthesia. Like he's drugging kids,
Yeah.
and God knows what he's doing. That is disgusting. I
Hmm.
mean, Jesus Christ, man. That's almost like, I mean, killing somebody is worse, but like, dude, just kill me, then do that to
Yeah,
me, for God's
and
sakes.
that's I think that's the argument is like is killing them worse? I mean, to kill a kid, as much as I love when kids die in horror movies, it's a fucking movie at the end of the day.
Right.
You know, to kill a kid is awful, but to ruin them and make them continue on with that fucking awful memory and that trauma might be worse.
Oh man. Well,
But
let's put Brian Peck to bed. We're gonna move on. Let's start this out right here with an opening paragraph for Return of the Living Dead 3. 4 years would pass before serious consideration would be given to the possibility of another Return of the Living Dead movie. In that time, the horror genre had changed. Shamelessly derivative and profitable slasher sequels had begun to dwindle, making way for such critically acclaimed psychological thrillers such as Silence of the Lambs, and the zombie genre was showing signs of dying out once again. Whilst Kiwi filmmaker Peter Jackson was set to shock audiences with his splatter flick Brain Dead, released under the title Dead Alive in the United States, and Sam Raimi was prepping to bring his Evil Dead franchise to a conclusion with the tongue-in-cheek shenanigans of Army of Darkness, none other than Tom Savini was given the opportunity to direct a Night of the Living Dead remake, a movie that he missed a chance to work on 20 years earlier. It goes on to talk about, prepping, Tom Fox finally thinking maybe now is the right time, getting a deal, which I think he got a deal with Trimark. It's funny, he would wait out the options more or less to do another one or whatever with a company, and he would find another place to put out another movie. So that's why I think all the first three Return of the Living Deads, I don't remember about the last two, but like you said, they they don't exist.
they don't exist to the point where I believe the rights, something like this, the rights to them were just available for eBay for a pretty low amount.
Yeah, you're probably close to right there, man. But Return of the Living Dead Part 3, let's just get personal. I don't like this one more than Part 2, but I'm very happy to I mean, I say very happy. I'm very more than well, I'm more than happy to admit that I'm probably in the minority in that. It seems like the majority of people I know that are fans of this film usually say, "Oh, I like 3 more than 2." I
Yeah.
love 3. I just really love 2 as well,
So
but go
I
ahead.
don't I don't know that I would say I love three. I like it. It's good. You know, I'm not like embarrassed of it, but it's a pretty clear step down from two, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, the production seems to be a little bit more modest. The sets are modest. The money is modest, but I like Brian Usna a lot.
Yes.
I think he's great. So to give a little bit of context on Brian Usna came from I think he was working big time with Stuart Gordon, producing a lot of his films. He's coming from the Empire Pictures world. Um, and I don't know that Brian had been in Hollywood too terribly long at that point. And I don't
I,
know that this was the
I
first
believe
movie.
I believe he directed Society.
Oh man, talk about a
Yeah,
wild
and
ass
that's
movie.
there's effect similarities in the two, for sure.
Oh yeah. Let's see. Right here, Brian Usna. Here's a quote from him. Let's see. Okay, this is from David Trippett, the executive in charge of production on Part 3. The idea to produce the picture was brought to us by a foreign sales agent and executive producer, Larry Myers. I knew Larry from my acquisition duties, and he had worked at New World with our president at Trimark, Roger Burlage. Roger liked the idea that this was part of a franchise, and he put me in charge of it. Make it happen, he told me, so I went to work. I was a fan of the first one. I don't recall when I saw the second one. I have a love for that kind of film. I did work on the cult film Street Trash, which is I fucking love
Hmm.
Street Trash. And naturally, I was never the same afterward. My gut was that once Brian was on board, he would make this more twisted and not focus too much with the one-liners like more brains or send more cops. Brian agreed and wanted to make this with his own stamp on it. There was some concern over how twisted to go so as to not alienate the fans on previous films. Um, and here's a little bit more to that. And we're talking about Brian Usna, not Brian Peck, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
So when Brian came on board to do the film, he basically was going to see he wanted to make his own film, and that was kind of the thing he wanted to do. He didn't want to repeat part two, which I don't think the people that were involved with putting it together wanted that either. But this is what Brian said: when I asked Trimark what the requirements were for the sequel, whether it should be comedic, etc., they said no, I could do whatever I wanted, but I must include brain eating. That doesn't mean they weren't very engaged. They were very engaged. We worked closely with them on the script, budget, casting, etc., and I never remembered any creative or practical disagreements. They wanted to use James Cameron in a role, but he wasn't available, and they suggested a number of other key production personnel that we did use. For example, editor Chris Roth and director of photography Jerry Lively. The working relationship with Dave Trippett and Trimark was very smooth and collaborative. My first thought about the story that came was when I first interviewed Joel about the project. I forgot who Joel was in here. Anyway, I thought, shit, I lost my spot. Since there has been so many zombie movies already, that's what I thought about it then. That's what I think about it now. Zombie films have almost become the new westerns. I thought that a way to give a new perspective would be to make a protagonist zombie. I
Hmm.
had already begun to try that with Bride of Reanimator, and in retrospect, regretted bringing the bride to life. So later in the movie, she was a fantastic character. Her angst, poignancy, and inhumanity were fascinating. So with Return 3, I thought to give a character like her the whole movie. So that was the initial idea for Return of the Living Dead 3. It is important to note that Brian Peck. Well, I don't think Brian Peck had committed. Well, I say he hadn't committed any crimes at this point. Honestly, there's no telling what the hell
Yeah,
Brian Peck was doing at this point.
you have no idea, and he is in this movie too.
He's one of the ballistic
Yeah,
technicians,
yeah,
um, which is one of my favorites. One of my favorite parts of the movie, which we're gonna get there because there is a hilarious story about the actor there.
oh,
Here's one more thing from Brian, then we'll get a little bit more personal. Even though Return 3 was legally the second sequel to Return of the Living Dead as a horror film, I felt like there was also a blood relation to Night of the Living Dead, and I wanted to place my story into a world which would not contradict either. I loved how O'Bannon solved the problem of linking Return to Night, and yet in a completely original direction. The prologue in which James Cameron refers to Night of the Living Dead as fictionalized versions of true events was brilliant. It was funny as well as giving license to create a new Living Dead mythology, one based on gas bringing the dead back to life. Also, in O'Bannon's version, even body parts could be reanimated. Killing the brain did not kill the ghoul, even though the Living Dead and Night of the Living Dead did not infect the living through saliva. In Dawn of the Dead, that became the case. Return made the Living Dead brains hungry zombies, not just flesh hungry cannibals. Which I think we talked about this last time. Return of the Living Dead really modernized zombies the way we kind of know it today, more than anything.
yeah. I would say just as, if not more, than Romero's movies. because when I mean I'm kind of binging that show I Zombie, and it's all zombies eat brains and that's it. They don't care about any other part of the body. The Simpsons Treehouse of Horror, Dial Z for Zombies, short or whatever you want to call it. It's all brains. They're worried about brains, and they do chew on that, but that's the Simpsons. I think once they started showing up in commercials, brains. Oh, zombies. They moan for brains. That became what it was, and that wasn't a thing before Return. Just the
Yep.
same way that zombies didn't eat flesh before Night.
Yep.
Zombies were voodoo creations before that.
That's true. All right, so let's get personal. Return of the Living Dead Part 3. When was the first time? Well, you talked about this earlier. You saw Part 3 basically right after Part 2, which was
Yeah.
your first one you saw.
Mhm.
Initial thoughts on Part 3?
It's lesser. It was more serious. It was a little less fun. Um, the lead. This one I'm not nearly as like kind of it's not nearly steeped in my brain as much as the other two. So the character names I don't remember like any hardly. But the main guy, he was a cool, early '90s dude. So I like him. The drummer riding a bicycle, leather jacket, kind of, and Mindy Clark is gorgeous.
And Julie and Kurt are the stars of the film. That's their
Yes,
characters' names. J.
yes,
Trevor
yes,
Edmond and Melinda. Yeah, Melinda Clark. What a beautiful young woman. Which is probably one of the reasons people love
yeah.
Mindy. But she's right here in front of me. I had to for this when I was doing this podcast. Like, let me put my Part 3 poster up because it'll give me some. She's lovely.
Yeah.
I mean, do you like where the story goes? This has been dubbed the Romeo and Juliet
Mhm.
zombie film. I think it's cool.
Yeah, I definitely like it. It's very '90s. Um, Not that that's a bad thing. As a kid, it was. I've talked about this a lot. As a kid, I feel like most kids are this way. Like all movies are just a miracle that they happen. Everything is just as good as everything. Like as a kid, there's no difference between like Seven with Brad Pitt and Children of the Living Dead. As you get older, you realize, oh God, they're so different. This is so bad, or vice versa. And so it was great. I didn't mind the effects they're not good at all in this movie. I mean, just to touch on that now, that's a real sticking point to me. But yeah, it was a fun little movie, and it kind of goes quick. It's a quick movie too.
Yeah, we're
Um,
moving around. We've got scenes at the ballistics military base. We're going to gas stations. We're driving around. We're on dirt
yeah.
bikes.
And it's another one of those things. I know Pizzol talks about how kind of like Friday Part 8 is kind of that's the end of the weekend. Like Return 3 is like that was the end of the Saturday night. That's all right. We'll watch this and then we'll hit the hay.
It's
So
so funny you mentioned that. I know for a fact. I remember this vividly. My first time watching Return of the Living Dead Part 3. Do you remember when Walmart? I did a video about this years ago, and I did a video called "Remember when Walmart used to sell cult horror films?"
mm,
And it was those 8-movie pack of
yeah,
DVDs, and it was all movies like Slaughter High and My Best Friend is a Vampire. Well, and I still have them. It's somewhere again buried deep in this horror room. It was an 8-movie pack, and in there was Return of the Living Dead 3. And that was the first time I watched this movie. Now, I'm sure that the picture quality on that thing is so bad because it's like 3 movies to a disc, but
yeah,
I remember watching Part 3 and being so hesitant to want to watch it. I don't know why. I liked the artwork, but for something was telling me this is going to suck. This is going to suck. And I would put it off. But I remember I eventually watched it. And I remember liking it. I remember thinking it was good. One thing I'll say about 2 and 3 is I do think that there are movies that they just you got to revisit them, and I think you'll start to
mm,
appreciate things more and appreciate things more. And there are movies that I just want that man. They would always once I would see them, they may not have been movies that stuck up my mind to be like, oh my god, this was amazing. But they would be movies that I would say I want to revisit that again.
yeah.
Especially, I would want to revisit that one again. So 3 would be one that I would be like, this one was, I like this one. Let me watch it again. Let me watch again. I can watch this a movie a bunch. It's not a movie I can watch once and be like, okay, time to move on.
Yeah.
Which is one of the beauty of these three movies, quite frankly, is they're so great to revisit. But I remember, not to sound cliche, but the first time seeing Mindy Clark in this movie, I mean, she just is. That camera is in love with her, and then so is the audience. I mean, she was just she made in the hands of a lesser performer or basically almost anybody else. This movie fails, in my opinion, because J.
Yeah.
Trevor Edmond, I like Kurt, but let's be honest, who's on the poster? She's on the poster
Right.
of that movie for a reason.
Yeah. I mean, he could be replaced with anybody. You know, and as long as it's not like you or I staring straight at the camera, reading our lines,
Yeah.
it's going to be fine. You're not losing or gaining too much by keeping or switching him out. They do a good job. Brian or Yuzna does with kind of not that they make her dumpy or anything at the beginning, but she's not like otherworldly attractive in the beginning. But as that kind of reveal after she starts, jamming shards of glass and shit into her, it's just like they kind of just reveal her, and it's just like it's
Oh
a work of
man.
art.
Oh,
And
dude.
that's saying something because if you've watched anything she's done out of character off of that movie, she's stunning. And
Oh
even still
yes.
so,
Does she do conventions still?
I don't know. I'm not sure. I would have. I imagine she at least once in a while.
So let's talk about some standout scenes in this movie. For me, obviously, the big one is when Julie is looking for some excitement, and she convinces Kurt to take them up to the military base that his father works at, and you can tell Kurt is he's totally in love with this chick, and he's coming into his manhood. And I know that at this time, Kurt is told by his father, "Hey, we're going to be packing up soon. Got to go." Blah blah blah. So he's bummed out. Actually, this happens after this scene, and
Yeah.
this scene actually is the catalyst for that.
Hmm.
So
And
Julie, go ahead.
it's kind of funny. I think after he tells him that he's well, I'm going to run away. We're going to Seattle. Which is really a sign of how early '90s it was. Like Seattle was like the mecca
Yeah,
for
Pearl Jam and
for
Nirvana
yeah,
country.
yeah. Mhm.
Um, so they make their way up to the military base, and so Julie wants to just get some excitement in her life. Julie is not the type of girl to I couldn't be with Julie because I'm a homebody, and I could tell Julie wants to be up and at 'em. She wants to go places, So and this is one thing I do like about Return of the Living Dead 3 a lot. I love the mythology of the 245 trucks, and I like that this movie tried to, I thought that was a nice touch. Um, and I hate to credit Brian Peck, but I do know that he was one of the people that came up with an initial, not script by anything, just an idea, and he was like, why don't we do something where we're trying to figure out what this chemical is and what it does and how to harness its power and how to
Yeah.
figure out what to do with it and how to get the right leveling of how to bring somebody back, almost kind of like Reanimator in a
Mhm.
sense, like what's the right concoction, if you will. But we're trying to figure out how to use this chemical. So there's this, I would say, not the famous scene, because the famous scene is at the end, but the second famous scene in this film, we see this experiment about to go down, and there's this old skinny man that we learn was a legitimate homeless man,
Yeah.
an old homeless grandpa, if you will. You know,
And
uh,
I don't think he spoke English. I want to say they said he was like Argentinian or something. I might just be like conflating that with something else entirely, but I feel like that's true. Um,
I think I have something in here about it. I'll have to look it up. I think I remember saying that. Uh, I think it was actually Brian Peck who actually said something about it, but he was like, when we got this guy in, he was odd. He
hmm,
didn't really speak fluently.
yeah.
He would speak in English, but he would kind of say words every now and again, and he was very whatever. It's almost like they almost made it sound like he was cognitive enough to know that he was doing something and he was in front of a camera, but like almost like he didn't care.
Yeah.
Like he was just like, okay, you know, but he was a homeless man.
Yeah.
Just
Like that takes a toll on the brain after a long time. I mean, if he'd been out there in a while, it tends to happen.
I wonder how they go about this. I mean, Brian News sees a homeless man and he's like, I need this guy for my movie
Yeah.
because this probably goes into, we don't have to put too much money into making him
Mhm.
look dead.
That's it. He's on death's door as it is. Another thing is funny. They talk about how he would fall out of that little cod piece they had on him. Like I think the thing was like you're just a little too big for the cod piece, and he just kind of you know, oops,
And his
we got to
dick and
stuff him back in.
balls, his dick and balls would slide out of his little man thong, out of
Yeah,
his which is great. But the scene is, I love the scene. When we think things are handled, he pops up, he's acting crazy, and then the old zombie man drops back down. And as soon as everybody's laying low, they're breaking their sets down, getting ready to leave. He comes back and he raises hell, and he infects and kills one of the guys in the ballistics room. Well, this does not go well for Kurt's dad, and he basically gets transferred again.
yeah,
Um, and this would cause a rift between him and his son, and him and Melinda Clark, or Julie. They get on the dirt bike, and they're like, "We're not leaving anywhere." He's driving like a bat out of hell. Melinda is trying to basically grope him while he's driving his motorcycle, which isn't the worst problem to have, but
no,
unfortunately, this causes him to wreck, and Melinda dies.
yeah,
So what
and
does he do? Go
the
ahead.
way
Sorry.
they kill her is like there's no blood, but it's kind of gruesome because she flies off the bike and just like
It's just
smack
smacked.
into a telephone pole. Like
Yeah, I like the way they did that. That scene was done pretty well. So he's like, "Well, shit, man, this is my woman. I mean, I'm just bailing on my dad for this, so we got to bring her back."
yeah,
So he trioxins her up, and this is basically the crux of the movie. She's slowly going to turn into a zombie, which I can buy that. I guess if she hasn't been dead that long,
yeah,
you know, I can buy the pseudoscience, if you
yeah,
will, of
and
that.
it's kind of unintentionally. There's a parallel to Pet Cemetery,
Yeah,
um, because Lewis, he brings Gage back and then finds out Gage killed his wife, and he said, "Well, she hasn't been dead that long. I could bring her back, and she'll be normal." I get like Gage sit too long. That's why he turned. But not that Kurt had any notion of really what was supposed to happen. But I mean, maybe he assumed that the homeless zombie, you know, was just dead a long time or something. Another just dumb kind of thing about that homeless zombie is that my buddy, one of the first bands he played in, there was a sound guy in Buffalo. His name's Joe Tall. Just shout him out. I don't know if he's still alive. He was dead ringer for this guy. Just a little cleaned up because he lived inside. But it's just every time I saw him, I just fucking laugh. Cool guy, best sound guy for my money in Buffalo at the time. 10 years ago at this point. But yeah. So like this movie like would frequently just kind of pop into my mind just because I'd see him all the time.
oh, that's great. Here's a quote from Melinda Clark on getting the role. When I first heard about this, I wasn't sure if I wanted to do it, but then I read the script, which was penned by John Penny, who seems like a great dude, especially if you watch the documentary. Uh, Love from Beyond the Grave. I keep wanting to say that's the name of it. It's on
I,
YouTube as
I,
well. I'm in the ballpark of them. That's not it, but I'm
yeah.
sure that's it. But when I read the script, I was really surprised. I like the challenge. Julie's a rebellious teenager from a dysfunctional family, and the only thing she has is her boyfriend. So they're really playing out that strange Romeo and Juliet, Sid and Nancy type relationship. She turns into a zombie, but she's not just a bad ghoul walking around moaning. She then says her spirit is intact, and at times she struggles with the fact that she's in danger of attacking her boyfriend, which I think was just the right way to go. And I think
Mhm.
I remember my first time watching the film after she dies and she gets brought back with the trioxin, I was so ready to hate the movie at that point. I was like, okay, this is gonna really let me down because she's gonna be bumbling and mumbling, and they didn't do that.
Yeah.
So I mean, the movie carried, and one of my favorite scenes in the movie, it's to me, it's so fucking hilarious, is when she's like, "I'm hungry, I need to eat." So they go into the gas station,
Yeah.
and the broad starts eating Debbie cakes and those little pink fuzzy wuzzy
Little
cakes.
snowballs.
Yeah, snowballs just right in the aisle, and he's like, "Julie, come calm down, Julie." I mean, she's
Yeah.
just attacking him.
So I don't know if this is because I've always just been fat, but I feel that hunger. So I don't know if it's like the script is done, the acting's well done, and I feel her hunger, but or if it's just me being fat like garbage. But I thought that worked well.
How funny is that? So they're gonna piss off the Latino group playing the arcade in the gas station. I forget. It's been a while since I've seen part three, but I remember there a chase scene ensues not long after this, and I think they held uh the cashier of the gas station hostage, right? So they put him in the
Yeah.
van, and they start driving the van, and he's in the back of the van, and the cops are chasing him. Don't think he like doesn't he kick the doors of the back of the van wide open, and he's waving to the cops like "Help me!" And then the cops just shoot him anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. It was right in the head.
But that was a fun scene. The gas station scene is so memorable to me. The movie would ensue. There's back and forth, and then we get to the end where we get a character that I love, the Riverman.
Yeah.
I love the Riverman. One of my favorite moments is when he's like that could have been a Don Calfa role right there, to be honest with you. Like
Oh yeah.
really bizarre. Maybe that was a missed opportunity. But actually, I have a quote from Don Calfa about Return of the Living Dead 3. If you want me to read it,
Yeah.
here it is. Because I didn't know anything about Don Calfa with this movie. He goes, I must tell you, I've got to get a copy of Return of the Living Dead 3 that my friend Brian Usna did. I did Necronomicon for him. He's a very intelligent man, very wonderful, very clever, and he just took it into another direction. I saw little pieces of it and I liked what I saw, and I went, oh, I'm liking this. I just couldn't do part 3. I had another situation plus an emotional thing of my wife walking out with the kid,
Oh,
and I just couldn't do it. I think Kent McCord did the part of something like that. So it seems like Brian, I mean, there's stuff before, and I'm just kind of giving you the context. Brian Usna would have used Don Calfa.
mhm.
I think Brian was going to use James Cameron as well, but Don Calfa at this point was having really bad personal problems, which was a shame because even though I wouldn't have put, but here, let me finish this. Let me finish this, and then I'll go. I think Kent McCord did the part of something like that. It was the general, and I had very specific ideas on that part. And I said I'd like this guy to be a bit of an invalid, and I think I had ideas for my hair or something, and I talked to him about it, but I just couldn't do it. So Don was going to want to be in this film, but it sounded like Don was going to go for more of a comedy role as well because he wanted the Kent McCord, lieutenant in charge of the trioxin experiments to be bumbling or
Yeah.
silly, which wasn't what the movie was. Which in my mind, I thought he would have been a perfect Riverman, Don
Yeah.
Calfa.
Yeah. Because I think that role you can play with that a little more. You can throw a little
His
humor
crazy
there.
eyes,
Yeah.
yeah. But that's unfortunate. It would have been great to see Don Calfa in here. But you know what? The movie is the movie.
Mhm.
The cast is the cast. There's some good performances in this movie. I think, like I said, uh, without Mindy Clark in this movie wouldn't have worked. They had to find the perfect looking woman, figuratively and literally, quite frankly. But she had that personality, man. I mean, it's amazing. The character that she created was so real, and it didn't seem fake at all. I just think she's fantastic in this movie. I mean, and I think she's probably the reason why this movie has, I guess, more fans than two.
I, I don't think there's any doubt about it.
Yeah.
And it's good work on her part. I think it's kind of it's a similar, it's a parallel. I know I've done this a ton, but with her and Lisa Wilcox in Nightmare 4. Apparently Lisa Wilcox is like loud, kind of cheerleader type in real life, and
Yeah.
they made her that little mousy, quiet. Oh, wouldn't say shit with a mouthful, as they say.
Right.
Um, and so like to be able to, and I don't think Mindy Clark necessarily is this badass, you know balls to the wall, partying all the time kind of chick in real life. So in that way, it's like it's playing it's acting. It's legitimately
Right.
doing something different than just, well, this is who I am. You know.
So to wrap this up, here's the last thing I want to talk about. I mean, when it comes to part 3, we talked about the special effects for part 2. I think Kenny was more so hindered with the restrictions on mostly Tarman,
Mm.
But part 3, it's interesting. You look at these pictures for some of the work that was done in part 3, and these pictures look great, but Sauce, I don't remember this half zombie or this half skeleton zombie looking as good on the actual film. I mean, that was after he split. There was an image of, here it is.
Yep.
So
Yep.
this is the tar man, if you will, of the
Yeah.
movie, right? Um, and I just think it's good,
Yeah.
but
It's fine, and that's the word "fine" would not have been used to describe the effects on either of the preceding movies. The designs are not great. I'm not like, just, it's not even so much the actual the pulling it off. It's the concept is off. I don't enjoy the tar men. They're just so far off the mark of what they were. Um, that it's weird, and I get whatever time has passed, and maybe the chemical has changed or whatever. I mean, there's explanations. It could have been just kind of throwaway lines or whatever, I guess. But um, honestly, outside of Mindy Clark and the homeless zombie, most of these effects just don't hit for me.
yeah, they're
It's
they're they're very they're just some just looks so modest. Like I remember at the end, the Riverman gets his head sliced in half or something,
Mhm.
and it doesn't have that shine the way the first movie did. And I know that Brian said he used different effects houses to do this movie to save time, and I almost wonder if that worked against him a little bit.
Yeah, there's
And
not real. There's yeah, I didn't know that, but to think about it, there's not like a uniformity really with how things look. So I guess it's conceivable that the good was done by one place, and then kind of all the gang makeup effects, and just like they're pretty awful.
yeah, I thought the old man Clarence looked pretty good, which was not, like again pretty modest what they did to him. They just kind of
Mhm.
they kind of affected his skin tone because he's very thin and
Mhm.
you know. I mean, I like the I don't hate the Tarman zombie. It's just I think it needed a little more work.
Yeah,
The hair looks like something from a Ruby's mask on him. But
yeah,
once he splits and we get this design, I thought this was okay. Where we got like I think the zombie splits and we get that
yeah.
half skull. That's
It,
better.
and kind of what you said is that looks better than it does in that picture than it does in the movie. You know,
But thankfully, it seems like this movie didn't focus so much. I say it didn't focus so much on the special effects the way the previous ones did, or the makeup effects, where it really focused more on the story, which obviously was the right choice given the budgetary limitations. So, I just, I guess I just want to talk about that because, I don't want people to just think, I think these movies that I love so much are just, everything's perfectly fine because it's
yeah,
not. There are things that could have been done better. I found the quote about Clarence.
yeah.
This is from Brian Peck. Yes, he was in fact a homeless guy and honestly a tad odd. He seemed a bit off. He was extremely thin, and when all made up, he was pretty disturbing to look at. The most wearing, the most disturbing thing, however, was that he was practically nude, wearing only that little strange cup jockstrap thing that, for whatever reason, kept coming undone, allowing his penis to flop out for all to see. You probably liked it too, you son of a bitch. To Clarence's credit, this didn't seem to upset him in the least. Since the cup fell open most often while we were strapping his arms up to the restraints, he was incapable of pulling the cup back himself, so the poor wardrobe lady had to run in and gingerly re-snap the cup while desperately trying not to touch his penis. This happened more times than I can tell you. Somewhere there was a tremendous amount of footage of Clarence Epperson's genitalia.
And Peck has all of it.
Here's a little bit of what I was telling you about with the effects. My approach. This is from Brian Usna. My approach to making the effects is that each shop has different strengths and specialties. On the main character effects and the key effects, I try to go with the best we can afford. On secondary effects, we will go with artists who have more ambition than credits. So there you go.
Okay.
And I think it shows.
Yeah.
And I don't hold it against the film, but I do think if we could have had more time and Brian would have been able to just get one effects house to do all the work, the film would just I really would have not much to complain about at all, but
And like it's not that it like ruins the movie, but it's if you're gonna go make a list of pros and cons, it's definitely a con. It definitely is a sour note, I guess, of the movie.
but obviously one of our main portions of the film that we love, and I think I can show this because there's really not too much nudity, is Melinda, her final sequence. Now in the documentary, I think they described her outward appearance as some kind of subtlety of saying she was a cutter, which would have made sense with her character in the film. And I think the way they described it was the same way some people who have the depression and deal with the cutting stuff, her way of doing it in the film was she was begging to feel pain. She couldn't at that point after she had died. So her outward appearance of being with the shards all in her, she was begging. She just wanted to feel something so bad. So that's why it's beautifully horrific the way I think it's described. It's a weird feeling when I see it. I tell myself, should I feel happy right now, or should I
Right.
feel guilty right now that like I've never seen anything like it till this day. I'll tell you that. I mean, Return of the Living Dead. I mean, there's a famous Fangoria magazine that came out when the movie came out, and it's her on the front cover of it, all in her full, in her full get up, and I don't know, man. I just, it's beloved by horror fans. I'll tell you that.
Oh, yeah. I mean, the story is definitely the star. Like it's tragic. You said earlier Romeo and Juliet kind of thing, and it's very much that. I mean, in the end, I mean, I hate to say spoilers because it's 30 years old, but or almost anyway. In the end, they both kind of die. They end up dying together, and there's you can kind of pull comparisons to Bride of Frankenstein in that regard.
Absolutely.
We belong dead.
Now, Sauce, we're gonna start wrapping this up. This has been really fun. I don't know about you, but like I literally could talk about these movies
Oh
all fucking night.
yeah.
Now, in this book, again, I urge anybody to try to get it. Now, here is the section of Necropolis and Rave to the Grave. I just want to read you this one thing. John Russo, executive producer of Children of the Living Dead. The first sentence. I hate Children of the Living Dead.
Is it that what he says?
I swear to God. That's the first sentence. I'm going to read you this paragraph. John Russo, executive producer. I hate Children of the Living Dead. It's the worst film ever made. This is a quote from this book. I worked with the screenwriter on 5 revisions, and finally the script was getting to be pretty good. I was supposed to have total creative control over the production, including the hiring and firing. But as soon as her father put her up to the production, including the But as soon as her father put up the money, Karen L. Wolf, Joe Wolf was the executive, right? Who produced Nightmare on Elm Street, went back to her original script and refused to change a word. So all of my work as a producer and as the person who got people such as Jerry Jergley, Vince Guastini, Bill Hinsman, Tom Dabunsky, and Tom Savini to come on board went down the drain. It was one of the worst experiences of my long career, and I hate being blamed for it. So,
Oh, who blames him for that?
I mean,
Like, I,
you got to think.
I
Well, I guess you just got to think. People are ignorant. They
yeah,
not everybody is going to know that one of the producers put their daughter in charge of the
yeah,
movie and was like,
yeah,
"Do whatever you want,
because
baby."
yeah. I mean, not to get too far into this, but this movie is fascinatingly bad. And she was like, she had kind of like rewrote the script anyway. Like that script isn't even his script at that point. What you see in the movie, and she would not allow any sort of deviation whatsoever. Not a well, I would say but instead of and. No, you say and. It says and in the script. You do not change a word. And she's just a taskmaster, a real bitch. Um, because it's daddy's money, like you said. She gets to do. It's either shut up and get paid, or find somewhere else to work.
I think that sooner rather than later, whether it be a podcast episode or just bringing you back on the channel, we have got to do a discussion about this movie. I really go behind the scenes and just like how I'd want to call it the rise and fall of Children of the Living Dead, but it's
It's
really
just
like the fall and the deeper fall. And if people listening to this right now have no idea what we're talking about, I bought Children of the Living Dead because of Sauce. You mentioned it,
yeah,
and
yeah, like
so there's a video store near me, and when they told me, "Hey, look, you can." Honestly, a lot of these horror movies, like we don't rent a lot of the horror movies anymore. We mostly rent new release stuff
mhm.
because they have a senior citizen fan, like I say fan base. They have a senior citizen clientele that keeps them going. They go and rent
That's
movies there.
crazy.
So they told me, look, if you can bring some horror DVDs up if you want to buy one, you can. I have it, and I'll have it till the day I die. I bought Children of the Living Dead, and I was like, is it really one of the worst movies ever made? I mean, it is bad.
It's so I did a commentary on it
Oh, I know you did.
months back, and so I talk about it a lot. I think about it a lot because it was traumatizing. And I watched Children of the Living Dead about the same time I watched Return, just by happenstance. They both happened to be on like one of the premium movie channels. One of like the stars, like derivatives, like the movie channel or whatever the hell it's called. And just it was bad then, and then go back watching. I realized doing the commentary how agonizingly slow the movie is, and there's flashbacks, and just like it's dialogue. It's just like clear ADR, and they're just that they film just like town.
It's
It's
something
like
else,
just,
man.
it's atrocious.
Yeah. Really quick before we wrap this up, if you're still listening to this, first off, you're awesome, and you're a Return of the Living Dead fan. Obviously, I did find that quote of about the script for part two, and it's really quick. I just wanted to read it. This is from Ken Wiederhorn. I had a script I had written with Robert Avrek, who I brought in to work with me on the De Palma movie, and that was called Dark Tower, and it was about a haunted skyscraper that came up from Vinegar Syndrome a few years ago. It's not really a great film, if I'm being honest. We were going to do that in Spain, and then Sandy met Tom Fox, who had the title rights to Return to Living Dead, and that's how I met Tom Fox. So I happened to have this other script that I had worked on. I was flogging that around, not having much success, and Fox read it and said, "Well, why don't we just call this Return of the Living Dead 2? Retitle it and change a couple of things." He wanted very much to reprise the roles of the gravediggers, and that's how that happened. So, like I was saying earlier, I couldn't. My sticky note fell off, but I was just surprised to know that Tom Ken Wiederhorn had written a script that was called something like about grave robbers, and it turned into Return of the Living Dead 2. So I just thought that was interesting because I know that people, if you just watch the documentaries and listen to William Stout, it was just, you get the impression that Ken was just like, okay, Return of the Living Dead's great. Now let me just write a script and just do the same movie and just
Yeah.
change a few things. So I just thought that was important to note. I just, because I don't think it's fair for people to just think that was the case about Ken, because I actually like Ken a lot. I like the interviews he did for the Scream Factory Blu-ray. He's a nice man. He just was not a huge horror fan, which I respect honesty. I like that
It's
Jamie
you know
Lee
yeah.
doesn't just, Jamie Lee was the same way. She does it from the movies for money, and she's just always like, look, I'm not really a big horror
Well,
fan.
yeah, but you know, I don't know, maybe it's like the time or place, but
Well, she's not perfect.
very she was very disingenuous in the promotion for the newest Halloween movie.
Oh,
So
without question.
I guess we'll leave it at that. But
I think the honest Jamie Lee ever was on. I mean, I say the honest she ever was. She did that Horror Hound convention in 2013, and you
the
know,
one that's on the DVD set,
yes,
yeah,
yeah. So she was pretty open there. Which I mean, if she just says some contradictory things, then
sure.
she would see. But anyway, dude, let's wrap this up. This was awesome, Sauce. End of the day, I know that I asked you last time, what does Return of the Dead mean to you? And you told me everything. And some people may think, wow, but I get that and then some. What does Return of the Living Dead 2 and 3 mean to you?
Uh, less than everything. It's representative of a lot of my childhood. Like I said, I saw these movies. The second one more than the third. I saw them a bunch because as a kid, tend to fall asleep the later it gets. But um, I have nothing but fond memories for both of them, and I'm glad that. I mean, three to a lesser extent. I'm glad that a company has given them kind of the shine that they deserve. Three to a lesser extent, but like Scream Factory really kind of rolled out the red carpet, for lack of a better term, for two. And Vestron did put out a Blu-ray that I don't own. Just it's always wackily priced whenever I see it, but for part three. Um, so that they weren't lost to VHS or anything like that, which cause that would be tragic in my opinion. If that one of those kind of lost gems, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man, I think for me, it's just like, while Return of the Living Dead is my favorite movie ever, and it's clearly the best, I need 2 and 3. I gotta have them. To me, it's my, man, and talk about it. Just what I love about it so much is, and I'm sure you're the same. The reason the Nightmare franchise is my favorite franchise, or one of the many reasons it's my favorite franchise, is it's just individuality. Each entry feels vastly different. I mean,
Yeah,
two is polar opposite from one.
yeah,
Then three is everything that two isn't. Then
mm-hmm.
four completely changes its personality. And that's what I love. It's like the individualism of those movies. And Return of the Living Dead, the trilogy, it's the same way. Of course, I say trilogy. I know, obviously, we know that there are more, but it's just understood. It's complete, and that's the beauty of the fan base, is it's just completely understood. It's a trilogy, and
Yeah,
I love the individualism of it. These films were made with I'd say love, but it's really like just these films were made with tough love. I mean,
yeah,
and
yeah. I mean, as much as we spoke at the beginning about how everyone talks about them looking back with like rose tinted glasses, but they're still like eager. Maybe eager is not the word, but they're more than game to talk about these when they come up, and that's similar to the Nightmare series. And I think on a small scale, maybe nothing that we think about when we think about these things, but because they're still like by the people that made them, they're still kind of revered. Like, whether they had a good time on set or not, they remember it as a good time. Which you can't really say about a lot of the Friday sequels, or even the original, or the Halloween movies. Frankly, I mean, a lot of other franchises are one-off movies.
yeah, and I think ultimately too is, these movies stand the test of time. So good or bad, you know they
Yeah,
they keep sticking around, and I love that these films got good Blu-ray treatments. I love that Scream Factory. I stand by. It's probably one of the best releases Scream Factory ever did.
Mhm.
They really packed a punch with that Return of the Living Dead, and I was so happy that they did part two because to me it gave the film credibility.
Yeah.
To a personal. It was a personal thing for me, because you know I don't need Scream Factory to put out all the movies I love, but I just loved part two, and I when they said they were doing it, it kind of solidified in my mind like I wasn't wrong,
Yeah, it's
I
worthy.
was,
It's
you know,
yeah,
and I think if people can reevaluate, I say reevaluate, just watch the film for what it is. We've been able to do that with other films, in major franchises, and watch the film for what it is. Just enjoy the content. I think when
yeah.
you
I
do
mean,
that, that's what makes the trilogy work so well.
and I feel with two especially, like we talked about, three seems to be regarded better than two. Think of all the fans of like Friday Five or Halloween Six,
Hmm.
and when they talk about it, when they defend it, they say exactly that. Well, just watch it for what it is. It's well, then why won't you give Return Two the same kind of a chance? But
Yeah.
I totally agree with you. If they would do that, I think they'd come out actually having a good time and enjoying the movie.
Yeah. And maybe it's just that I liked I don't like to have the same thing done over again, but the soundtracks, these films again, it's just like the Nightmare movies. The soundtracks, my favorite movies, it's not just the movie, it's the soundtrack, it's the artwork. I mean, when it comes to the Return trilogy, all three posters, amazing.
Mhm.
The movies, great. The soundtracks, great. They have it all. They're the total package. So that's one hell of a trilogy. Um, you know, Sauce. I mean, I don't think there's a day that goes by where not one of these films just doesn't run through my head in some form or fashion. And maybe I'll think about the poster for two, or I'll think about a scene from one, or I'll think about Melinda from three. Like every day, one of these movies is running through my head. Are you the same way?
I think about Mindy Clark a lot. Uh, I mean, yeah, definitely the original. The original literally is like hardwired into my brain. Two, I think about a lot because, like I said, that the bully kid once he turns was one of the weirdly, in a movie like that, one of the more frightening things to me as a kid. Like he really creeped me out. So, and just for whatever reason, his face will pop into my head. I'm like, oh shit, you know. Um,
uh, but yeah, what a hell of a trilogy, man! It's my favorite. Some of my favorite films ever. This was fun, man. I'm really glad you were able to do this with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was
Uh, yeah,
definitely fun.
it's my pleasure. I could talk about these movies all day. I just want to watch them now.
I
Um,
think I'm going to.
yeah, me too. Anyway, guys, thank you. This has been a special You Need a Horror podcast with the honorary member at this point, Steak Sauce from the Off the Grill podcast. I find him on YouTube at Off the Grill podcast. And remind people what time were your shows again?
7:30 p.m. in the East every Monday.
There you go. All right, guys. Well, we love you. We hope you enjoyed this. If you're listening, I hope people listen to us when they're driving. I always think that that's the best way to listen to a
Yeah,
podcast. That's my hope
definitely.
anyway. Anyway, let me end this. I can just keep going on tangents. Thank you. We love you. We'll see you guys next time.
Iris loves you.
This has been a production of the You Need a Horror podcast. You need it, we got it. Thank you for listening.